under the dim light of an endless twilight, where the horizon blurred into shades of steel and blue, the sea stretched like a vast, breathing creature. It sighed against the jagged rocks of the northern coasts, inhaling the scent of pine and frost, exhaling the deep and ancient song of its own heart. Each wave moved as if guided by will, deliberate, patient, whispering stories older than the gods themselves. In those waters there was no true calm, only moments of deceptive stillness between breaths, pauses in which the ocean seemed to dream of what it could never hold. Here, in this realm of shifting gray, the sea was not merely a body of water. It was alive, pulsing, watching, and remembering. Beneath its mirrored surface lay a hidden world, where warmth and darkness intertwined, where light fractured and vanished like fleeting thoughts. To mortal eyes, it was a boundary. To divine ones, it was a pulse, an unending rhythm that cradled both birth and destruction. The northern gods called it the edge of silence, the womb of storms, for in its depths lived beings older than frost, older even than the whisper of wind through Yggdrasil's roots. Among those beings was she, Ran, the mistress of the drowned. Her name was carried on the lips of sailors, spoken with both awe and trembling. They said her hands were nets woven from the night itself, her touch soft as foam, her embrace colder than mercy. They feared her, yet every man who looked upon the sea at dusk wondered in some secret corner of his heart if he might one day be chosen by her, to fall beneath the waves, to be gathered into her dark arms where no storm could reach him again. Ran's domain was unlike any other. It was a cathedral of blue shadows, where pillars of coral glowed like captive stars, and forests of kelp swayed to the pulse of her will. Her halls were silent, except for the murmur of water against stone, the hush of the ocean's eternal heartbeat. There were treasures there, gold from sunken kingdoms, jeweled goblets that once held mortal laughter, fragments of ships swallowed whole. But the greatest treasure was Ran herself, for within her dwelt the beauty and terror of the sea, the promise of peace wrapped in the inevitability of surrender. Above, the world was ruled by wind and light. Aegir, her husband, lorded over that realm, the surface waters that reflected the heavens and bore the weight of the gods' feasts. His halls shone with brightness, filled with the echo of laughter, the warmth of shared mead, the music of waves dancing against his ships. Yet even his might could not pierce the veil that separated his domain from hers. Between them lay the depths, a vast silence that mirrored the unspoken yearning of two eternal forces bound by love and distance. The sea, in its totality, was their union, his light and her shadow, his calm and her hunger. But within that union lived a quiet ache, for though they were one in essence, they existed apart in form. Aegir ruled the surface, the part that the sun touched. Ran reigned below, where the sun's memory faded. She longed for the light, not to possess it, but to feel it against her skin, to let its warmth reveal the face of the one who had once held her close in creation's dawn. He longed for her silence, the stillness of her gaze, the way her voice could turn the chaos of waves into a single breath. And so every tide became a meeting, fleeting, tender, tragic. The sea rose to meet the shore, then withdrew, unable to stay. The waves were their whispers, their eternal conversation, carried across the vast body of the ocean they shared. Sometimes, when storms raged, mortals would swear they heard them, voices beneath the thunder, calling to one another, lovers caught between fury and longing. The gods knew of their bond, yet few dared to speak of it. Some envied them, others pitied them. For to love across such distance was to bear an ache that never healed. It was said that even Odin, who saw the fates of all beings, turned his gaze from the sea when its song grew too mournful. The Norns themselves would pause as they wove destiny, listening to the rhythm of the waves that marked the sorrow of two immortals bound by their own nature. Mortals, however, could not help but be drawn to that mystery. They built their lives upon the edges of Ran's realm, casting their nets into her dark waters, knowing she might take them at any moment. They feared her hunger, yet prayed to her for favor, for fish, for calm winds, for mercy when the sky darkened. Each offering cast into the sea was a small act of devotion, a whisper to the unseen queen who waited below. Some said that when a ship went down, Ran herself came to greet its crew, her hair drifting like the seaweed that crowned her brow. Her eyes reflected all the sorrow of the world. To those she claimed, she was not cruel. She was inevitable. And in that inevitability lay her beauty. Ran was not the tempest, but the silence after it, the soft pull that drew broken masts and lost souls into her keeping. Her desire was not for destruction, but for stillness, for what could not escape her embrace. She was the quiet beneath chaos, the peace that followed struggle, the dark womb of the sea that took all things and made them one again. Her loneliness was endless, her longing as deep as the abyss she ruled. Above, Aegir felt her ache in the rise and fall of the tides. When he looked upon the horizon, he saw her reflection in every shimmer, her presence in every swell of his waters. His heart, vast and ancient, knew the rhythm of her yearning. The sea's calm was his gift to her, moments of tranquility when he could feel her closeness, when their worlds brushed and the great ocean breathed as one. The northern winds carried their story, whispers of a love as immense as the sea itself, a love that could not be contained within mortal measures. It was said that when the aurora spread across the sky, it was the reflection of their union, light descending to touch the water, water rising to meet it, their colors blending into something neither sky nor sea could name. To the mortals who watched from their frozen shores, the sea was a god to be feared. To the gods who watched from the halls of Asgard, it was a reminder that even divine hearts could hunger, that even immortality did not spare one from desire. The ocean became a mirror of all longing, endless and unknowable, whispering to every being who ever looked upon it, there is more beneath the surface. And so the myth begins, not with thunder or war, but with a sigh, the breath of the sea as it dreams of itself. It is a dream of touch, of connection, of what lies forever just beyond reach. It is the ache that lingers in every calm wave, the secret pulse that hides in every storm. The gods may call it the sea, mortals may call it fate, but those who listen closely know its true name. Ran, the heart of the ocean, the desire that never sleeps. For in her the world finds its reflection, beauty born from solitude, power softened by yearning. And beneath the cold northern waters, where light fades and silence deepens, her story waits to be told. In the farthest depths of the northern sea, where sunlight perishes and time loses its voice, dwelled Ran, queen of the drowned, mistress of shadows beneath the waves. Her realm stretched in silence, carved from the bones of ships and the memories of those who had loved the ocean too deeply. She was the pulse beneath the calm, the whisper beneath the roar. Her skin shimmered like moonlight through water, pale yet touched by the faint blue of the abyss. Her hair flowed endlessly, a cascade of dark strands that drifted like seaweed, framing a face that could soothe or destroy with the same gaze. Her eyes held the shifting color of storms, gray, green, silver, never still. Ran's beauty was not mortal, nor gentle. It was the kind that drew one closer, even well knowing it meant surrender. Every movement of hers felt like a tide, deliberate and entrancing. To look upon her was to feel the pull of the deep, that slow, aching invitation to let go, to sink, to dissolve into the infinite. There was no cruelty in her, only inevitability. She did not hunt, for all things came to her in the end. She simply waited with patience born from eternity, while the world above forgot her name and still fed her its lost. Yet even in her silence, Ran was not without desire. Her heart, if such a thing could be said to exist within her, bat not for conquest, but for connection. The sea around her mirrored that longing, calm on the surface, restless beneath. She loved the soft light that pierced her darkness on rare days when the surface allowed it. She loved the warmth that filtered down in trembling threads, like touches denied. That warmth belonged to him, Aegir, her consort, her counterpart, her distant reflection. Aegir, lord of the upper waters, ruled with a different kind of majesty. He was the face of the sea that men adored and worshipped, vast, commanding, and alive with motion. His laughter could be heard in the roll of waves against the shore, his joy in the rhythmic sway of ships carried safely through calm weather. He was known among gods and mortals as a host of boundless generosity. In his hall, built of coral and pearls and illuminated by captured starlight, he welcomed all who honored the ocean. Mead flowed endlessly from golden horns, and the song of waves accompanied every feast. But beneath his warmth and grandeur, Aegir was haunted by the same ache that stirred the depths, the longing for the part of himself he could never truly touch. He looked upon the surface of his own waters and saw reflections that belonged to Ran, the dark gleam of her gaze, the quiet grace of her motion, the mystery that lay just beyond reach. He loved her as one loves the horizon, always visible, never attainable. When storms were born, they came from the meeting of their wills. It was said that Aegir's passion called to Ran's hunger, that his yearning stirred her stillness until the deep rose in answer. The clash of their desires created tempests that shook the heavens. Yet, even in fury, there was devotion, a lover's quarrel painted across the world's oceans. The lightning above was Aegir's cry. The whirlpools below were Ran's sigh. When calm returned, it was their reconciliation, soft and wordless. They existed in perfect contrast. He was the open sea, golden and wild, touched by air and light. She was the abyss, secretive, quiet, where no flame could burn. He gathered life, she received death. He represented the ocean's laughter, she its final breath. Together, they completed the circle that all living things must follow. But within that balance lay tension, not of hatred, but of unfulfilled longing. For though they were one essence, they could never fully meet. The surface could not become the depths, and the depths could not rise without losing themselves. Ran would sometimes rise toward the edge of his world. When she did, the sea darkened, and sailors spoke of sudden stillness before a storm. In those moments, she reached for him through the trembling veil of the waves. She would let her fingers graze the light that danced upon the water, feeling its warmth seep into her palms before it slipped away. The warmth always faded, but for a fleeting instant it filled her with memory. She remembered when the world was young, when their union had not yet been divided by depth and distance. Aegir, feeling her nearness, would calm the winds. His voice would soften the surface, smoothing the ripples so her reflection might linger a little longer. He would whisper her name in the language of tides, not loud but eternal. The sea itself would listen. Every creature that swam between them, every current that touched both their realms carried fragments of that yearning. There was love between them, yes, but also envy. Aegir envied her stillness, her command of silence. He envied how everything that touched her became part of her, how she never lost what she claimed. Ran envied his light, his laughter, his reach toward the gods above. She envied how mortals sang to him in joy, while they only cried her name in fear. Yet beneath envy there was admiration. They saw in one another the parts they lacked, halves of the same soul divided by nature.
At times, Aegir would visit the edges of her realm. He would send down his light, a shimmering glow that illuminated her dark halls. Ran would appear in its reflection, her body outlined by currents, her expression unreadable. They would speak in the language of motion, in the way waves rise and fall, in the way bubbles drift upward and dissolve. His warmth would press against her cold, and for a breathless instant the two worlds would touch. Then, as always, the light would recede, and she would be left in silence once more. Aegir's love was generous, expansive, filled with motion and giving. He sought to understand her, to bring her into his world of laughter and light. But Ran's love was consuming, deep and wordless. She did not seek to share. She sought to merge, to erase the boundary between them. In her longing lay a dangerous tenderness. She wished to draw him down, to hold him so tightly that no light could escape. And in his desire lay a quiet defiance. He wished to lift her up, to see her eyes illuminated by the sun. Neither could succeed without undoing the world itself. For if the depths consumed the surface, the sea would fall still. If the surface lifted the depths, the ocean would lose its mystery. Their love was eternal precisely because it could never be fulfilled. It existed in the tension between touch and distance, between surface and abyss. It was the pulse that kept the sea alive. To the gods they were opposites, destined to balance creation. To mortals they were symbols of what the heart most fears, to love something one can never fully possess. But to each other they were more than gods. They were mirrors, reflecting endless desire, endless loss. And so they remained, Aegir in his radiant halls of foam and light, and Ran in her shadowed kingdom beneath. He ruled the laughter of waves, she ruled their sighs. He cradled the living, she welcomed the lost. Yet every tide, every pull and release was their unspoken conversation. Every calm after storm was a promise renewed. I will find you again. Through them the sea learned emotion. Through their longing it found rhythm. The waves became their heartbeat, the endless proof that even gods ache for what they cannot hold.
The sea had always been their meeting ground, a shared body divided by depth, a promise that both united and denied. But now, even that fragile harmony began to waver. The tides grew restless, their rhythm uneven, as though the heart of the ocean had begun to stutter. The barrier between Ran and Aegir, once bearable, once beautiful, had become unbearable in its constancy. Desire, once soft as the tide, now swelled like a storm building on the horizon. Ron felt it first. The quiet between waves had changed. It no longer sang of peace, but of yearning sharpened into ache. She could hear Aegir's laughter above, distant, golden, alive, spilling from his halls as the gods feasted on the surface. It reached her through the water, muffled, yet clear enough to wound. His voice was warmth, her world unlit. His joy echoed through the upper currents, a melody she could not join. And with every burst of his laughter, the depths darkened. Shadows thickened around her. The silence that had once been her comfort became her prison. The ocean itself began to tremble under her mood. Currents twisted, rising in slow spirals that brushed against the sunlit world. Fish scattered, corals shivered. Ron's desire was turning the sea wild. Above, Aegir felt the shift. The waves he so tenderly guided began to break in strange rhythms. His ships rocked without warning. His feasts dimmed as the glow of his hall flickered. He sensed her pull, that quiet call from the deep, seductive and sorrowful, drawing him downward. It was not anger, but need, a longing too immense for any god to ignore. He could not resist it. He looked to the horizon where the water turned from blue to black and felt her there, his queen, his mirror, his shadow. Every swell that reached his feet carried her name. Every wave that retreated whispered her plea. He closed his eyes and listened. The sound was not of storms, but of breath. Hers, deep and deliberate, echoing through the sea. That night the ocean rose higher than it had in centuries. Clouds gathered, heavy and low, and the wind faltered as though holding its breath. The gods spoke of omens, but Aegir knew. It was her calling him, her loneliness bleeding into the tides. He descended, following the pull that no storm could disguise. The water embraced him, folding him into her darkness, and for the first time in ages, he felt the cold of her world. Ron appeared from the shadows like a thought made flesh. Her body shimmered in the dim light that filtered down from the surface, her hair swirling in dark ribbons that caught the faint glow. Around her, the water stilled. Even the sea itself seemed to hesitate, caught between them. "You come when I call," she said, her voice low, more sensation than sound, but never for long. Aegir reached toward her, his fingers grazing the edge of her form before the current pulled them apart. "You summon storms when I do not come. You send waves to devour my ships. You frighten the mortals who love me." "I remind them," she whispered, "that love and fear are the same." He wanted to deny it, but her words settled into him like the weight of the deep. The sea between them pulsed, charged with unspoken desire. He moved closer, and the water warmed. For an instant, the boundary dissolved. The waves that separated their worlds became threads of light and shadow, weaving them together. When they touched, the ocean itself convulsed.
The currents tangled, rising in spirals that broke the surface above. The storm that followed was not born of anger, but of longing too fierce for silence. Waves crashed against cliffs, the wind howled through the fjords, and lightning flashed like veins of fire through the clouds. Mortals looked upon the chaos and thought it destruction, but it was creation. Two forces colliding, craving, merging, then breaking apart again. Aegir held her face between his hands, his voice trembling like surf against stone. I have given you my tides, my storms, my strength. What more do you seek of me? Ron's eyes shimmered, infinite and cold. Your stillness, your surrender. I want what lies beneath your calm, the part of you that even the gods cannot see. He faltered. To surrender to her would mean to lose himself, to sink into her endless dark, to abandon the sunlit realm he ruled. Yet how could he resist? She was the part of him he had denied since the dawn. Her gaze pierced him, filled him, drew him. Every current seemed to chant her name. But something new stirred within Ron, jealousy. It bloomed quietly, like ink spreading through clear water. For as she looked upon him, radiant even in shadow, she saw the reflection of all he would not give. The gods sang his praises, mortals offered him their gratitude, even the waves bowed to his will. He belonged to the light, to laughter, to movement, and she to silence and solitude. The sea began to churn with her envy. The waters darkened until no trace of his glow remained. You are adored, she whispered, circling him slowly. Your name is blessed, but mine is cursed. I am the thief, the devourer. Even you fear me to love me fully.
Aegir reached for her again, but she slipped away like mist. Fear? He said softly. No, I fear the loss of what you would make me forget. Her lips curved, not quite a smile. You mean the surface? He did not answer, and in his silence the storm deepened. Ron's hands rose, and the ocean obeyed. Waves surged upward, their crests curling like the spines of beasts. Ships shattered against invisible walls of water. The gods looked down from Asgard and saw the sea boiling with desire, a love too vast for the mortal world to bear. Aegir caught her wrists, pulling her close. Their foreheads touched, and in that touch the sea grew still again. If I stay, he murmured, the surface dies, the light fades. And if you leave, so do I. Her voice trembled with both fury and ache. In that instant, the depth between them became unbearable. She wanted him not as a god, not as a king, but as the pulse beneath her own being. To hold him, to draw him down, and to let the ocean close above them until there was no separation, no sky, no sun, only them. But Aegir could not surrender. His nature bound him to the surface, to the gods, to the living. The sea depended on his balance. The storm began to wane as his will reclaimed it. The warmth between them cooled, the light began to return. Ron looked upon him, her eyes luminous with sorrow.
You would rather rise than drown with me." He hesitated, his voice breaking like foam. "If I drown, there will be no one left to lift you from your loneliness." She turned from him, her hair fanning like ink through water. "Then let me have what remains," she whispered. And with a single breath, she released her nets. They spread across the sea like wings of darkness, rising to the surface, capturing what the storm had broken: ships, men, dreams. She gathered them all into her keeping, not out of cruelty, but longing. Each soul she claimed was a fragment of him, a piece of the world that touched his light. Aegir watched, torn between awe and grief. Her hunger was his own, reflected back, endless, consuming, divine. As the storm subsided, he rose once more to his realm, the waves parting around him like sighs. The sea grew calm again, but beneath its stillness lingered a truth too heavy to forget. Their love was not peace, it was tension eternal, the surface forever yearning for the deep forever craving the light. And the ocean, vast and restless, carried their desire in every tide, every breath, every heartbeat of the world.
The night was endless, and the sea had fallen into that sacred stillness which comes before surrender. Above, the moon cast a trembling path of silver across the waves, a bridge between realms, fragile and fleeting. Aegir stood upon it, gazing down into the depths that shimmered with faint blue light. He could feel her there, Ran, waiting, pulsing like the heart of the ocean itself. Every breath he took carried her name. Every tide that touched his feet whispered, "Come." He descended. The water opened for him, wrapping his body in cold silk, pulling him deeper and deeper until the stars vanished and the world became only motion and sound, the slow, rhythmic thrum of the sea's heartbeat. He could not tell where he ended and she began. The currents coiled around him like fingers, gentle but insistent. The darkness grew warmer, almost luminous, and from its heart she appeared. Ran emerged as though the ocean itself exhaled her. Her skin glowed faintly, kissed by phosphorescence, her eyes glimmering like the reflections of lost stars. She did not speak at first. She only drifted toward him, her movements fluid, deliberate, dangerous. Aegir's breath caught, though he no longer needed air, as she reached him. Her hands found his chest, cool and soft, and the sea around them stilled as if the world itself leaned in to listen. "You came back," she whispered, her voice flowing through the water like a song, half sorrow, half wonder. "I could not stay away," he answered, his voice trembling with both defiance and surrender. "Then drown with me." It was not a command, but a plea, the purest she had ever spoken. Her words trembled like light beneath water, fragile and infinite. Aegir looked into her eyes and saw everything he feared: the pull of the deep, the loss of self, the peace that came only with dissolution. He should have turned away, should have remembered his place among the living and the gods, but the ache in him had grown too vast. He touched her face. The instant their skin met, the sea came alive. Waves rolled above them,
unseen but felt, as though every current mirrored their heartbeat. The darkness pulsed, expanding and contracting with their breath. Ron's lips parted, the water around her shimmered as her body pressed against his, her form weightless yet solid, her presence overwhelming.
Aegir drew her closer, his hand tangling in her hair, his body trembling with the heat that rose even in the coldest part of the ocean. Their foreheads met, the first true meeting of surface and abyss. The pressure around them grew immense, crushing, ecstatic. Their mouths met, and the sea roared. It was not a kiss in any mortal sense. It was a joining, a merging of will, of hunger, of endless waiting breaking into a single, perfect instant. The ocean itself convulsed with their union. Above, waves towered like mountains. Storms bloomed across the horizon, lightning tearing through clouds as if the sky itself were being split open by their longing. Ron's arms encircled him, and Aegir felt himself slipping, not away, but inward, into her. The boundaries between them dissolved, their essences swirling like currents colliding, light folding into darkness, darkness blooming into light. Her hunger became his warmth became hers. For a heartbeat, they were the sea, complete, whole, unbroken. But such perfection could not last. The same force that bound them began to tear them apart. The light within Aegir burned too brightly for her depths. Her shadows pulled too fiercely against his glow. The ocean quivered with the strain. Her fingers tightened on his shoulders, not in cruelty, but in desperation. "Stay," she whispered, though her voice shook with the knowledge that he could not. "If I stay, there will be no sea, only you," he murmured, his words breaking into the current. "And if you leave, there will be no me." Her tears, indistinguishable from the water, drifted upward, glowing faintly like scattered pearls. The ocean's rhythm changed, slower, heavier, mournful. He wanted to promise her eternity, to vow that he would never leave her darkness, that he would let himself sink and vanish within her. But he knew the truth. If he yielded, the balance would die. The waves would fall still. The storms would never come again. The sea would lose its breath. Ron sensed his hesitation and pulled him closer still. Her body pressed against him, her mouth finding his again, this time not in desire, but in defiance. It was a kiss that devoured, a plea that broke the surface of eternity. The water around them turned wild. Every current rose and tangled, every tide crashed and fell as if echoing the chaos in their hearts. Aegir returned her passion with the same desperate hunger, knowing that this moment, this single convergence of light and shadow, was all they would ever have. He felt himself sinking deeper, his strength unraveling in her grasp. Her hair wrapped around him like strands of midnight, her heartbeat echoing his own until he could no longer tell which belonged to whom. The ocean's pulse grew louder, faster, then fractured into silence.
And in that silence came the revelation. Their love was not meant to unite, but to sustain the divide. The tension between them was the heartbeat of creation, the breath that kept the sea alive. The surface needed the pull of the deep needed the promise of the surface. If either surrendered completely, the world would fall still. Ran felt it too. The truth coursed through her like pain, pure and luminous. She broke the kiss, her breath mingling with his in trembling waves. "You are the light I can never keep," she said, her voice thin as a current breaking against stone. "And you," Aegir whispered, "are the darkness I cannot live without." Their foreheads touched one last time, a gesture both intimate and final. Around them, the sea began to move again, softly, rhythmically, as though soothing its own ache. The water that had burned with their desire now cooled, turning calm, reflective. Ran released him. The currents that had bound them loosened, spiraling away like sighs. Aegir's body began to rise, drawn upward by the pull of his realm. She watched him ascend, the glow of his form fading into the distance until he became only a shimmer in the dark. Her hands lingered in the empty water, reaching for what could no longer be touched. When he broke the surface, the world exhaled. The storm was gone, the sea lay smooth and glistening under the moon. Yet within its stillness, the memory of their union remained, a heat beneath the calm, a pulse that would never fade. Below, in her silent kingdom, Ran closed her eyes. The touch of him lingered upon her skin, a warmth that refused to die. Around her, the drowned souls drifted closer, drawn by her sorrow. She did not speak, but the sea spoke for her, each wave rising and falling in rhythm to her heart. Above, Aegir stood once more in his radiant halls, but the light seemed different now, softer, sadder. He could still feel her within every current, every ripple. The ocean had changed. Its breath now carried their longing, its tides whispered their story. They had touched the edge of what gods were forbidden to reach, union so complete it bordered on annihilation. And though they had returned to their realms, something eternal had shifted. From that night onward, the sea itself would remember them. Every calm that followed a storm, every sigh between waves would be their song, passion mingled with loss, love intertwined with surrender. And in the quiet between tides, when the world slept and the moon laid its silver path upon the water, Ran's voice could still be heard, soft as foam, deep as eternity, whispering to her absent king, "Come back to me."
When dawn broke, it did so gently, as though afraid to disturb the ocean's fragile calm. The storms of the night had passed, leaving the waters hushed, trembling with the memory of what had transpired. The sea breathed in long, slow sighs, each wave soft and deliberate, carrying remnants of light across its vast skin. The world above knew only that the tempest had ended, but beneath that still surface, everything had changed. Ran drifted in the quiet of her realm, her body heavy with exhaustion, her soul stretched thin. The darkness that once obeyed her had softened, no longer fierce, but mournful. The water carried a faint warmth still, the ghost of Aegir's presence, fading yet persistent. She let it touch her, linger over her arms and face like a memory refusing to leave. For the first time since the dawn of their creation, she did not command the currents, she simply listened to them, hearing in their whispers the echo of his heartbeat. He had risen back to the surface, back to the realm of wind and sky, and yet his essence lingered in every drop of water that moved between them. She felt it in the tides, their rhythm altered, slower, deeper, almost reverent. Where once they obeyed only her will, now they carried the memory of union. It was as though the ocean itself had learned to breathe differently, to love differently. Above, Aegir stood upon the edge of his gleaming hall, looking down at the calm expanse below. The gods gathered around him spoke of how the sea had quieted, how the storm had broken without ruin. But Aegir did not answer them. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon, where the sky met the water in a faint shimmer of silver and blue. The sunlight reflected upon the sea in a way he had never seen before, deeper, gentler, as though light itself had learned humility. He could still feel her. Ran's touch lingered beneath his skin, a constant pull toward the deep. It was no longer the consuming hunger that once threatened to drag him under, but something softer, more enduring, a tether, invisible, unbreakable, binding them across distance and silence. For days, the ocean remained still. Sailors who ventured out whispered that the waters seemed alive, watching them, almost tender. Fish swam closer to the surface. The winds carried a sweetness unknown to that harsh northern air. The sea, once unpredictable, had found a strange serenity. Yet beneath it, in places too deep for sunlight, currents moved with quiet purpose, as if the world below and the world above had begun to speak in harmony.
Ran's sorrow did not vanish, it transformed. No longer did she rage against the surface. No longer did she pull ships down in envy. Her hunger became something more sacred, a devotion expressed in the way she received what the sea offered her. Those who drowned were not taken in anger, but cradled in her arms, their final breaths woven into her lullaby. They became part of her stillness, offerings to the love she could never fully possess. Aegir, in turn, changed the way he ruled his waters. The feasts in his hall grew quieter, less boastful. The gods who came to drink his mead found him subdued, his laughter softer, touched by an unfamiliar melancholy. When they asked why, he only smiled faintly and said, "The sea remembers." And when he poured their cups, he did so gently, as though each drop carried the weight of something sacred. Though they could no longer touch, they began to move in rhythm again. When Aegir stirred the surface into gentle swells, Ran answered with a pulse from below. When she sighed in her darkness, he sent ripples of light down to her, faint and fleeting, but real. The ocean became a language between them, one of distance, yes, but also of communion. Mortals felt it too, though they could not name it. They found peace in the sea's new rhythm. The waves no longer sought to destroy without reason. Storms, though still fierce, broke sooner than before. Fishermen who once feared the depths began to speak of Ran with reverence instead of terror. They left offerings not only for Aegir, bringer of bounty, but for his shadowed queen, who received their lost with tenderness. The sea had become both merciful and mournful, a reflection of divine love transformed. In the silence of her abyss, Ran would often look upward. From her halls of coral and bone, she could see the faint shimmer of his light far above, a memory of the sun filtered through endless leagues of water. Sometimes she would rise, not to touch it, but to feel its warmth brushing faintly against her face. She knew he was there. She could feel his gaze in the steady rhythm of the tides. And Aegir, standing upon his cliffs at dusk, would watch the ocean darken and think he saw her in every glint of blue beneath the waves. When the wind grew still, he would speak her name softly, and the sea would answer, not with words, but with motion, a subtle shift in the water that only he could sense.
Neither forgot the truth their union had revealed, that love need not conquer to endure. It could live in distance, in the ache of separation, in the ceaseless exchange of longing that gave the world its rhythm. Their passion had not destroyed them. It had become the heartbeat of creation itself. The norms, weaving the threads of fate, watched and whispered that the sea had changed its tone. It now carried a deeper song, one that spoke of duality, of yearning balanced by restraint, of two forces that could never merge but could never be apart. The gods heard it in the crash of waves, the mortals in the sigh of tides upon the shore. It was the sound of love surviving the limits of eternity. And so harmony was born from their sorrow. Ran's darkness learned tenderness. Air's light learned humility. Together, though forever apart, they made the ocean what it was meant to be. Not merely vast, but alive. A place where beauty and danger, desire and restraint existed in equal measure. Sometimes, when storms gather at sea, the waves rise with strange grace, their peaks silvered with light, while their depths glimmer with shadow. It is said that in those moments, Ran and Air meet again, not in body, but in essence. The storm becomes their dance, their wordless reunion. And when it fades, the calm that follows is unlike any other. Soft, luminous, sacred. Thus the world learned to see the sea differently, not as an enemy, nor as a god to be feared, but as a living testament to the balance of love and loss. Every tide, every foam-tipped wave carries the trace of that divine longing.
the eternal conversation between the depths and the surface, between Ran and air. And though they dwell in separate realms, their hearts remain entwined in the water that binds all things. The sea itself became their promise, that love, even denied its fullness, could still shape the world, not through possession, but through persistence. The ocean sighed once more beneath the morning light, its voice both sorrowful and serene. Somewhere beneath that endless surface, Ran's whisper rose through the deep. I am still here. And the tide that reached the shore, gentle and shining, was his reply.
There are stories the sea keeps to herself, murmured in the quiet between waves, spoken in the language of foam and undertow. Among them, none is more enduring than the story of Ran and Aegir. It is not merely a tale of gods, but of the ocean itself, of what it means to love something too vast to hold. Their union and their distance live in every tide that reaches for the shore and retreats again. Each wave is their heartbeat, the constant pulse of longing, fulfillment, and release. When one listens closely to the sea, one can almost hear it breathing. The inhale is Ran, deep, dark, and desirous, drawing everything into her depths. The exhale is Aegir, wide, luminous, giving back to the world what she has taken. Together, they sustain the rhythm of existence, the eternal cycle of craving and calm, of surrender and return. Their love is the ocean's secret, endless, shifting, and impossible to possess. The mortals who sail upon that vast expanse sense it instinctively. They feel it in the sudden hush before a storm, in the shimmer of moonlight over black water, in the way the sea can cradle and devour with the same tenderness. Those who are lost to her depths are not forgotten. They become part of her memory, threads woven into her eternal longing. Those who survive her embrace return changed, quieter, more reverent, their hearts marked by something they cannot name. They have heard her whisper, and they know the ocean loves, but she does not keep. Ran, in her solitude, embodies the truth that desire is not only hunger, but also devotion. She takes because she feels too deeply, because she cannot bear the emptiness that comes when the world turns away. But within that darkness lies an aching tenderness, the kind that comes from knowing the cost of love. She is the part of the soul that yearns, that reaches beyond reason, that hungers even when it knows it cannot be satisfied. Aegir, in contrast, represents acceptance, the grace of holding without clinging. He knows the sea's moods, its rage and its calm, and he loves them both. He is the serenity after the storm, the patience that endures through distance. His love for Ran is not a conquest, but a vow,
to rise and fall with her, to remain even when she disappears into shadow. He is proof that love does not need to dominate to be eternal.
Together, they form the balance that sustains the ocean, and, by reflection, the balance that sustains the human heart. Every longing carries its answer. Every desire finds its counterpart in surrender. What Ron and Aegir discovered in their storm is the truth all lovers must face, that love is not about possession, but about resonance. It is a meeting of tides, a brief and sacred harmony in which two souls recognize themselves in the motion of another. The sea teaches this lesson endlessly. It reminds us that beauty is born from impermanence, that even separation can be sacred when it deepens understanding. When the waves retreat, they do not abandon the shore. They promise to return. When the depths swallow the light, they keep it safe until dawn. So too with love. What departs does not always vanish, and what remains is never truly still. In Ron and Aegir, the gods of the sea found not perfection, but reflection, one mirroring the other, each incomplete without the other's flaw. She, the devourer, found compassion in his calm. He, the giver, found depth in her hunger. Together they became the embodiment of life's most primal truth, that all creation begins in tension, and that from that tension arises harmony. The ocean, vast and mercurial, carries this truth in every motion. Its calm is never without memory of its fury, its rage never without the seed of peace. To stand before it is to stand before the echo of divine love, fierce, eternal, unresolvable. Those who listen to it with open hearts may hear in its rhythm their own desires reflected back, the wish to be known, to be touched, to be seen and accepted, even in darkness. And so the myth endures, not as a relic of faith, but as a mirror. Ron and Aegir are not merely gods of an ancient sea. They are symbols of the duality within every soul, the hunger to possess and the wisdom to let go, the storm that breaks and the stillness that follows, the ache of distance and the quiet joy of knowing that love, once awakened, never dies. Even now, when moonlight glides over the water, when waves roll in slow sighs against the shore, the sea seems to remember. Its whispers curl around the rocks like secrets spoken too softly to understand. Perhaps they are not meant to be understood. Perhaps they are meant only to be felt, the same way Ron and Aegir felt one another, through motion, through absence, through the endless dialogue of touch and release. To the gods, their love changed the sea. To mortals, it changed the meaning of love itself. It taught that passion, no matter how fierce, can coexist with peace, that loss is not the end of affection, but its transformation, that even in the quiet aftermath, love continues, not as fire, but as tide, returning, retreating, eternal. The poets of old said that every drop of seawater holds memory, that the waves that crash today remember storms centuries past. If that is true, then every swell carries a trace of their embrace. Each current moving beneath the moonlight hums with the echo of their vow. Even the smallest ripple at the edge of a forgotten shore is part of their story, whispering, "Love endures, even when unseen." When storms rise now, tearing at the heavens, it is not rage, but reunion. The thunder is their call, the lightning their fleeting touch. The rain that follows is their reconciliation, the mingling of salt and sky, tears and tenderness. And when calm returns, when the ocean glistens once more beneath the sun, it is as if both gods have exhaled in relief, having met again through chaos. To love as they did is to live as the sea lives, never still, never whole, but infinitely alive. It is to accept that desire is not a wound but a rhythm, that the ache of longing is what keeps the heart from sinking into silence. Their myth teaches that there is beauty in the spaces between touch, that love can survive even when it is denied its form. It is a lesson whispered by every horizon. What separates also connects, and what is lost is often what makes us eternal. And when one stands before the sea at dusk, when the wind stills and the world holds its breath, one might feel it, the faint vibration beneath the calm, the heartbeat of the gods who loved and lost and loved again. It is the pulse of eternity itself, whispering the truth their story left behind. That love, like the sea, is both depth and surface. It takes and gives, destroys and creates. It is what drowns us and what teaches us to breathe. The ocean does not forget, it only changes form. In every wave's rise and fall, Ran's sigh and Aegir's calm meet again, two halves of the same divine rhythm. And as the tide retreats one final time, leaving its shimmer upon the sand, it carries their vow upon its lips, silent, endless, and true. For as long as the sea endures, their story endures with it. The story of love that could not be contained, of desire that became devotion, of two gods whose longing carved the rhythm of the world. And every time the water touches the shore, it whispers the same promise to those who dare to listen, that love is vast, that love is patient, and that, like the sea, it never truly ends.